Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody, to the Bioactive Nexus. I'm Dr. Bill.
And I'm Professor Gene.
Great. And we have some awesome guests with us today, and we're going I guess we should introduce our topic. This is the second in our series for the Bioactive Breakdown. This is where we do
Bioactive
it.
breakdown.
Yes.
In which we dive deep into a topic with
Exactly.
special guests to help us do that.
Right. So today's topic today is the science revolution, elevating research in dietary supplements. This is something Gene and I obviously are very passionate about. We've both been about the science for decades. You know, a lot of you guys are new to this. I think Tim's been around a while though, but for sure, it's evolving, which is we're pleased to see that. I mean, I was running a clinical CRO like 14 years ago and trying to get big brands in our industry to do clinical research. They weren't really biting at that time, so it wasn't really the right time. But I love to see that we have all the new things coming here. First thing I want to say is, look, market growth for our industry is huge. It's a $177 billion industry globally in 2023 and looking to be over $327 billion by 2030. So that's a 9.1% CAGR. So that's huge, guys. So the growth is being fueled by consumer demand for science-backed and clinically validated products.
Yeah. And clinical studies are just on the rise. There's so many more companies now that are investing in clinical trials to validate the efficacy of their products and to differentiate their products in the market. The use of ingredients like omega-3s, probiotics, curcumin, it's often backed by really extensive research, which, look, guys, it enhances consumer trust, and nowadays it's just an absolute must.
Yep. And consumer trust is huge. We all know this is a highly consumer-driven industry. And a recent survey showed that like 70% of consumers now prioritize dietary supplements that have been tested or validated by scientific research. That's great news. That's like a big percentage now. And this shift is indicating the importance of credible data in purchasing decisions. So consumers are asking for it. So you got to get on board to do that.
That's right. And now when you consider the challenges that are posed by the bad actors in our industry versus the high standards that we're talking about. So the bad actors, we're talking about things like products failing to meet label claims or containing unverified ingredients, and that tarnishes the industry reputation because one bad actor, it gets in the news and it just has a negative impact on the industry as a whole. You see recent cases including discrepancies in NMN and curcumin supplement compositions. It has been a big issue. And then, of course, just unsubstantiated health claims, which totally undermine consumer trust and increase regulatory scrutiny. I'm seeing it all the time, especially on social media.
That's right. And so this commitment to high standards, this is not new. For Gene and I, we know this. And, even going back to the late 90s, we were really raising the bar in testing and standards when we were launching Centrum Herbals. We didn't have all the third-party labs came about after what we did at that time frame in the industry. That was huge. So this has been an evolving landscape for a very long time now, but it's accelerating. So you have certification programs like NSF, USP, third party, which, by the way, I helped NSF start their certification program.
I know you did.
So this is kind of cool to see that we're evolving and see newcomers like Xenia and Jeff and Mackenzie into this and what your companies and what you guys are doing. So super excited about that.
Yeah. So look, now we have some pretty significant growing expectations for science. You have consumer insights. You have a shift toward more informed consumers. I find this particularly interesting because buyers are now relying on data and science to guide their choices, which is the right thing to do. And millennials and Gen Zs are the ones that are kind of driving this, which makes me very proud because I got a son that fits right into that, as I know you do, Tim, and I don't know about the rest of you, but some of you might. And they want to see what the real thing is. They want to see what the real science is. They're not likely just to trust simply somebody that just says something. They want the proof. And then, of course, you've got the rise of wearable technology and personalized health platforms, which has further fueled this trend. Consumers seek targeted solutions supported by scientific validation.
That's right. And by doing all that, we've been building steadily over the years industry credibility. We still have bad actors in the industry. We still have all these things that we're always going to have opportunities to do that. But evidence-based practices and clinical validation have definitely enhanced our industry's reputation, and then really transitioning it. If I remember going to supply side, like the first one, it was like the land of the fruits and nuts. You know, it's like all the muscle bodybuilder guys. Sorry, guys, I don't want to poo-poo those guys, but it was all the bikini models and the big muscle guys at the show. That was really the framework of those shows back then. But the FDA and FTC are tightening oversight. They're talking about mandatory product listing and making science is a non-negotiable element now for regulatory compliance. So if you are not doing the science to support the claims you're making on your products, your days are numbered as far as I'm concerned. You won't be long before you won't be able to do that.
Right. Yeah. So, look, science is to this whole point. Science is supporting regulatory standards. It's just a big deal. Data not only from clinical trials not only helps in marketing, but does give you that regulatory approval. So, yes, absolutely. Now, I think that now's a good time to just give a little introduction to some of our guests.
Yep.
Hey, how about, let's say, Bill, why don't you introduce the first two guests? I'll introduce the second two, and then they can maybe give a couple of more sentences about themselves along the way.
Okay, so Xenia, I'm going to start with you. So Xenia, we first time attending Supply Side West like 3 weeks ago. So she reached out to Gene and I, and then we ended up talking and found out what she was doing with Aletheios, right? I'm pronouncing it correctly. Yeah, so why don't you introduce yourself, Xenia, and who you are and what you're doing in the industry here.
Absolutely. And I will say, normally with the Z at the front of my name, I'm used to going last. So now I have this disadvantage of going first. Yep, Tim's got it too in the last. I'm flipping it. Nice to see everyone. So my name is Xenia. I'm the CEO and founder of Aletheios, which is a two-sided platform for virtual human health research. It's a software platform, and we're very focused on lowering the barriers to research across the board in the industry by making research much more accessible, affordable, configurable across multiple different types of study designs. And I don't know if you want me to go into more on that, but I think it's probably time for the next person to be introduced.
Yeah, no, we're just going to do brief intros, and then we'll get into a deeper dive of what you guys are doing in terms of the space here. So Jeff, I'm coming to you, man. So the infamous Jeff Chen.
Infamous, oh,
and a great karaoke singer, I want to add. So.
Yeah, very good, awesome singer, man. So tell us about you, Jeff, and what you're doing here.
Yeah, so I'm a physician by training, studied the business of healthcare. Then was an academic at UCLA very briefly before starting Radical Science. And our whole mission at Radical Science is to enable and offer this kind of end-to-end clinical evidence generation, both the tech platform as well as the operational needs. So it's really turnkey solutions, and we package all of this in what we call proof as a service, where it's as simple as software as a service. It just works. And so our clients hand us the products, and then on the back end, we provide them with the clinical results, and we run our trials fully automated end to end in a virtual direct to consumer fashion. Some of the kind of the hallmarks of our approach is really going after large scale and diversity. Our trials generally start at about 500 people, and they go all the way to several thousand. And these are all double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials that we're focused on. So yeah, it's a little bit about us. And we're a public benefit corporation, and our mission is to enable proven and personalized wellness. And so that's kind of how we serve our clients.
Outstanding. Very good. Thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Our next guest I'm going to introduce is Dr. Tim Ziegenfuss, who I happen to have known for 1,000 years or so, and used to work with him with the same company, and a great guy. So Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself and the Center for Applied Health Sciences.
Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and share the virtual stage, so to speak. I'm the OG of the group. Bill, you mentioned that you sort of did some CRO work about 14 years ago.
Yeah,
I've been doing this since 2000. founded my own CRO, contract research organization. It's a brick and mortar deal. So we see people every day, 6 days a week. And we've been doing research initially in the area of exercise science. You mentioned the bikini models and the bodybuilders and so on. And so that's actually, my training is in applied physiology and nutrition, my PhD. So that's really where I cut my teeth, doing those kinds of studies. So fat burners and pre-workouts and proteins and so on. But over the last 24 years, we've expanded the breadth and depth of what we do so that now we do a lot more than just exercise science and sports nutrition. We do pharmacokinetic studies, pharmacodynamic studies. We do microbiome related studies, joint health, bone health, brain health, hydration studies. We did and published one of the first hemp/CBD studies when CBD was a bad word in the industry. And so, and we continue to do that. We move around a little bit over the last 24 years. Cleveland Clinic came in one time and bought up the whole damn building that we were in and said, if you're not part of the Cleveland Clinic, we're not renewing any leases. So that pushed us out, even though they wanted to buy us. Well, we weren't interested at the time. But I'm happy to be here. And again, I'm happy to share my experience.
Cool. Thanks, Tim. And then, of course, we have the head of clinical research at Reputable, Dr. Mackenzie De Jesus. So Mackenzie, who I've had a number of conversations with because, like Tim, we're doing a study with them. Well, actually, we're doing a study with Jeff too. We're doing a study with 3 out of the 4 of you right at the moment. But Mackenzie, tell us a little bit about you. I know, Zinnia, we're going to get there. Okay. So Mackenzie, tell us a little bit about you and Reputable.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Mackenzie. I'm the head of clinical research at Reputable. My doctorate is in health science, and I am actually an NPC bikini athlete, but I won't take offense to the comment.
Not intended. I didn't mind seeing the bikini athletes, I have to admit. Okay, so
few people know this, but Bill was actually used to be a bikini athlete as well. So.
No, it all fits together in terms of my passion for, evidence-based practice in the supplement world and really health and fitness, the medical world altogether. My background is really in bridging the gaps between what we know about the current standard of care and how it approaches health or lack of health and more so disease, and semi-neglects what we know about human health and physiology and how we can impact that and optimize it to achieve longevity and avoid disease. So I'm at Reputable now. We are a comprehensive research organization. We pride ourselves on utilizing wearable device data, not just as a dependent outcome, but really to better identify populations of people to ensure safety as we're testing products, but really so we can give our clients this full comprehensive view at the end that they can use to validate and support their claims.
Cool.
Very cool.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. This is exciting. I can't wait to get into our discussion here. So let's do that. Our first panel discussion here is going to be about revolutionizing science and dietary supplements. Okay, and the first topic, and we'll just take it as a roundtable for you guys to jump in and share what you guys are doing that fits into that. So our first kind of topic or bullet point is, innovations in clinical research, right? So what is really unique in terms of innovations for each of your companies? And then maybe you guys can each take a few minutes to talk about that and how that's contributing to clinical research and supplements. So who wants to?
Well, why don't we start in the same order just to make it simple? Start with Zinnia and then move to Jeff and Tim.
We're going backwards.
It continues. I think some of you on this call know that I came to this world from running pharma decentralized clinical trials, and that's a very different audience. Much higher budgets and very specific study kinds of needs. Mm-hmm. And through the experience of doing that, I began to think about evidence generation in general. Who gets to generate evidence? Why do they get to generate evidence? What actually makes it in front of a consumer? What makes it in front of a patient? And that's really the crucible in which Alethios was born. I also had pretty crippling long COVID at the time, and so I became much more interested in, well, why can't we measure the efficacy of things that are not necessarily pharmaceutical drugs? And that contributes to what I would say is a unique innovation for us in what we do. So we're a two-sided marketplace, meaning we have a tool for researchers to be able to run a study end to end. It's a comprehensive approach in that it's not just about digitizing a survey. You can add wearables, digital biomarkers, at-home tests to a study. It's an entirely no-code experience. You can recruit from the same platform. You can plan distribution. And that's across the board for different types of study designs, from, hey, I just want to collect some easy data right here on 25 people to see what kind of signal there might be, to a single arm observational where that might be more robust, to a placebo-controlled RCT. The approach for us is about democratizing the process of doing your research in order to enable multiple perspectives to be heard. Otherwise, I think we're so high stakes, right? Everybody goes for the same type of study sometimes when they're not ready. But if you can enable an affordable approach before that and encourage people to do science often, well, hopefully virtually, so that it's convenient for a participant as well, that's a whole new ball game. And that's, one of the things that we like to say we enjoy doing at a good price.
I have a question for clarification, because this is, I've heard the term a couple times, and I think you've said it a couple times at least in our discussions about democratizing. What does that actually mean? When people hear that, what should they think about?
I think for me, it's about making it possible to do research when you might not have been given the opportunity to do so before, and the opportunity to be a participant where you might not have had that before. And I say that because a lot of the funding in research does, of course, go to larger organizations or big payers and big providers, but there are a tremendous number of people on this call at Supply Side West, at academic institutions, at small biotechs, who want to be able to study what they do. Not necessarily to make a label claim, but to know how it works, to know if it works. And I think when you can open that up, you open the avenue for areas that are underfunded or not as popular in research. Maybe you have more studies that incorporate women of childbearing age. Maybe with a virtual study, you have people across the country versus people who are just at one academic medical center. I think that's what it means to me.
I wanted to just comment on something, Zinnia. So when we were talking at Supply Side, what I thought was rather interesting is you offer a hybrid model. So if somebody says, I just want to go to somebody and hand them everything and say, you do it all, you can do that. But you can also have a hybrid model where you guys do part of something, the company themselves does part of it, or the company basically does all of it and they're just using your platform to coordinate things. So I thought that was an interesting option, that you had those hybrid opportunities there.
It's part of the democratization, and we built the platform to be entirely self-service. So Tim, who is an amazing PI, could come in and run a study end to end without having to have a different vendor for recruitment, a different vendor for fulfillment, somebody else to integrate an Apple Watch or a Garmin. You can do it all in one place. So by making the platform self-service, we enabled the hybrid and the turnkey approach. For hybrid, we often call that our PI scut fee. And so we do some of the stuff that honestly PIs don't necessarily want to do, whether it comes to like, hey, I want all of the screenshots of the way in which this is going to participants to be uploaded to the IRB. Or can you help me with fulfillment? Or, we handle technical support for all participants by default, and that's one of the best and most fun things that I do during the week. And then that turnkey option is we try to match you with a PI that would be a good fit for your study. We don't take any commission from that. We don't charge the customer to do it. It's about bringing researchers from a diverse pool and saying, hey, you don't have to be part of a CRO to do this. You don't have to be part of a pharma company to do this. Your contributions to the field are welcome and valued.
That's awesome.
Very good. So how about Jeff? Go to Jeff now.
Yeah, it's Jeff.
Sure. Yeah, so I think some of the kind of areas that Radical has really been innovating on the traditional trial model is, yes, one aspect is it's a fully decentralized virtual direct-to-consumer approach. I think another key pillar is that we are vertically integrated. And it's kind of like Apple products, where for quality efficiency purposes, we go completely vertical. So we're designing the protocols, we serve as the PI, we're doing the recruitment, we're warehousing the products, we're shipping it, we're collecting the data, we're analyzing it in-house, we're returning reports back to the client. That's why we really created this new category called proof as a service, because in some instances, people want to go through the motions of a clinical trial, but really what's their goal? Their goal is to get data, clinical evidence, and proof on the back end. And all the stuff in between is sometimes quite complex and cumbersome work to get there. So it's really this kind of turnkey approach. Another kind of aspect of our model that's pretty unique is we go very large on the sample size. And part of that is because I think one common fallacy that you see in the wellness landscape is the assumption that a single dose of a single product is going to work for everyone. And so what this kind of, by having a large diverse sample size, you're able to kind of simultaneously see the effects of the product over all sorts of different consumer segments. And so our trials, again, are typically, they on the minimum, on the lower end, they're about 500 people. And those trials start at about 100K, all inclusive. And they can go all the way up to several thousand. And I think the other opportunity that a lot of people have used with our platform is they start now doing multi-arm trials. So we've had clients show up doing 8-arm trials, testing 7 formulations all against each other and placebo. And so it's simultaneously accomplishing some R&D goals. There's also claim substantiation because you had the placebo control. But it's also this whole layer of allowing their marketing colleagues to understand which consumer segments benefited differently from the products. Because if you're going to go out there spending acquisition dollars, why would you waste money acquiring a consumer who biologically is much less likely to benefit? They're going to leave you a bad review. They're not going to repeat purchase. They're going to churn. Similarly, why not focus your acquisition dollars on the segments that are disproportionately likely to benefit biologically, whether it's based on their consumption of caffeine or alcohol, maybe it's a demographic feature like gender, age, severity of the health issue as well. So those are probably some of the core areas that really define Radical and define this kind of category that we've kind of named proof as a service.
Cool. Thanks for that. So next we'll go to Tim. Tim, tell us a little bit about what's special there about Center for Applied Health Sciences and what you guys are doing.
Right on, yeah. I'm going to go in a little bit different direction here because remember, we're the OGs here. We're the meat and potatoes. When you think of clinical research, and again, I go back to Bill and his 14 years ago and so on, typically what would happen is companies would approach us. We would do no outbound marketing at all. We'd get just by word of mouth and publications that we had already authored in the literature. We would get queries from companies, hey, I want to do a study on this new product or on a couple of new products. We're hoping to make claims A, B, and C. Can you help us design? We don't know a whole lot about science, but we know we need it. Can you help us design a study, look at some endpoints, and then ultimately help us make these structure function claims? Because at the end of the day, the ROI for companies, right? I mean, it'd be nice if companies just spent money to do science and do science well, but the shareholders and the owners have to make a profit, or it's not going to happen. Or maybe it happens a few times, but if they don't see a return on that investment, it's not going to happen again. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on over the last 24 years, we've done over 130 studies, we have over 300 publications in the literature, is we're really good at designing research studies to get at certain outcomes and structure function claims. And one of the ways that that's sort of evolved over the last few decades is by partnering and collaborating with researchers who are experts in areas that we were not, right? So again, my background, applied physiology, nutrition, and then Dr. Hector Lopez, my dear friend who sadly passed away almost 2 years ago. He came in as a physician with master's degrees in molecular biology and nutrition biochemistry and so on, spine and sports medicine specialist. So we were able to establish collaborations with other affiliations, other labs, but also other university research partners. So for example, the omics, the whole idea of using omics and measuring certain gene expression patterns that respond to a nutritional intervention or a certain dietary intervention is very, very interesting and very compelling and very powerful. So getting those people in the room, right? We've heard it a million times, but if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And so I don't have to worry about that because I have lots of colleagues that are a lot smarter than I am in certain specific areas that I think consumers are interested in lately. And again, the whole personalized medicine and why, Jeff, you mentioned it, one dose of one product isn't going to work for everybody. Everybody responds a little bit differently. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons obviously is their DNA and how their body responds to a certain treatment. And so that's where omics comes in, the omics platforms. And so we've been embracing that technology by partnering with university collaborators who offer that. So for example, we'll take blood and tissue samples in my lab, and then we'll ship them on dry ice or wherever else. Maybe it's to Auburn University, maybe it's to UNC, maybe it's across the pond to a collaborator in Europe. And then we collaborate with them in their laboratories as they make those measurements, because they're the experts. We can't be experts in everything, right? So that's where we've been sort of tweaking our meat and potatoes model over the last couple of decades.
Very cool. Thank you, Tim. And Mackenzie, so what's
Yeah.
unique about what you guys are doing? I know you guys are working with wearables, so tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I believe that Reputable's unique innovation lies in how we strive to use the best digital technology that we can from many different aspects. And we integrate that with a really deep foundational knowledge of clinical research. So we really are trying to bridge this gap between this boom in digital tech and how we're incorporating it into research and clinical work, but also utilizing good scientific practice. You know, we all know there's issues with the models, but there is some good and historical scientific evidence in the foundational work that's been done. So we really try to incorporate these in a unique way so that we can deliver personalized, innovative solutions for clinical research. And we're working with lots of commercial health and supplement companies to be able to do that. We offer end-to-end service, all inclusive, from study design to IRB and regulatory oversight, designing the study, setting it up in our platform. Something unique about us is that we make sure that our clients also feel involved in their research. So while we're doing everything, we really want them to feel hands-on too. We just finished a client aspect of the dashboard where they will actually have full access to their study as it's going on, where they can kind of see how the metrics are changing and be more involved as well. If something is not working as hypothesized, especially in the supplement industry, there's no reason to continue out a trial without innovating and figuring out, hey, like HRV is plummeting right now and we hypothesized it was going to improve. Why might that be happening? So we really try to take a hands-on approach where we're working with our clients to achieve their claims. If there's issues in the claims they're already making on the website, to make sure that we're collecting the variables to bridge that gap in their work, or if they're really trying to strive for efficacy and safety and developing a new product, that we're giving them the data to do that as well.
Outstanding.
Very cool. I wanted to just take a moment to just mention that, as I mentioned earlier, I've got 3 of the folks here that we're doing some studies with. I didn't actually know Zinnia at the time, but we've got so for example, Tim, with Nutriland USA, we actually have 2 pilot studies running at the moment. One's on a black ginger extract, looking at some parameters of reduction of visceral fat. We have another one on our Miracell rice germ polyamines, looking at impacts on autophagy and the best dose for doing that in some other areas. With Reputable, we're looking at our somato phytomelatonin in the wearable devices, looking at various parameters of sleep and how that's working. With Jeff, we're doing a study again with our Miracell rice germ polyamines, looking at various aspects of cognitive function. So, putting our money where our mouth is here. These are our guests, but these are people that I personally am actually working with at their CROs, because we do believe that doing the research is the right thing to do, and I encourage everybody out there to do the same.
Yeah, and for consumers, a fair question to a brand is, where's your research? And if they give you, sort of second party or third party research studies that have been done on the ingredients in their product, you can say, no, yeah, sure, thank you, that's great. Where's the research study or studies on the product of interest, on what's in your bottle? Where's that? Because if they don't have that, I mean, that's the ultimate acid test, isn't it? Right? And for companies who aren't sponsoring those kinds of studies, I think that's problematic, to say it very nicely, because you could very simply say, hey, for every dollar we make, we're going to put 5% into an R&D bucket that then funds the research. Instead of saying, well, where are we going to get this money from? I don't have a budget yet, and so on and so on. You should, from day one of sales, put 5% away. It sounds pretty simple, and I think it is, but you have to embrace it early on.
I was making that argument years ago, the ROI in clinical research. I wrote the article about that, because at the end of the day, you can churn through marketing dollars and get new customers. And, all the products that I ever developed and launched in the market in my own companies, I always had high customer retention because they were effective and they actually worked for people. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. And people noticed a difference. So yes, it cost a little more to make that product, but I wasn't churning through marketing dollars to try and get new customers because of that. I had 80% retention, customer retention or whatever.
Well, sadly, that's not the business model, right? We have some bad
No,
actors.
it's not.
Right?
No.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
they get in to get out, right? They get in to make a lot of money, and these are the bad apples again.
Yeah.
Not the
Well, I can't wait till we get to talk about the future because I know where this is going. But let's talk about some real world applications and collaborative from your guys' experience working with your clients. So, how is obviously you're not looking for a client to come in, do a one-off study, then that's it. You want to build a long-term relationship with the product brand, I would think, or the ingredient brand, whatever it is. So how is that working for you guys in terms of collaborating and the real world applications where you've actually done the study for somebody and how that's actually helped those companies? So whoever, the floor is open, guys. So whoever wants.
Happy to keep the same order and jump in, and then Jeff, it's coming right to you.
Sure.
But our approach is somewhat license based. So we usually start with one study, and we try to optimize for our customers that, hey, we've done one study where maybe you're looking out to get a structure function claim for your new product, like one of the ones behind me. And we start there, but usually that customer sees a lot of merit in the approach for the speed at which you can get data, the volume at which you can get data when you're collecting it virtually, which really does help, and I think is very different sometimes from like one visit into the site or two visits into the site. And then they find that there's more that you can do than just running one big study to get one big claim. I think when you have flexibility, and I think all of us have some degree of software focus in our approach, but you can add different questions that collect more data on secondary endpoints and exploratory endpoints. And that's usually very useful for our customers. So we have one example. We were working with a salmon oil supplement. It was a randomized open label control trial. And we had a whole bunch of questions looking at sleep, and they were looking at collecting sleep quality data, both from 6 different wearables and a bring your own device study model, and collecting that data with surveys. But they also included a question that just said, what other physiological impact are you seeing? There was no prompting on, did you see any changes in skin health? Did you see any changes in maybe some type of allergy symptoms? It was an open-ended question. But the data that they got from that, and I don't want to jump on their results before that publication is out, but really interesting signal for the next study, really interesting signal for a future claim that they might want to make. So the ROI question that you were talking about before, I think people present doing research as a zero-sum game. You're either going to get proof that something works or it's not going to work. That is not the way science is done.
It's not the way science works. That's right.
And so, what I always encourage sponsors to think about one, why is somebody going to join your study? Don't just assume that people are joining out of the goodness of their heart. They want to see some benefit. They want to see their study data. They want to be compensated if it's a high intensity study. That's number one. And the second is, look at the ingredients, but look at your testimonial data. Look at people who might already be taking your product on the market and try and find more reasons than just we want to put a claim on the packaging to do research, because the reasons are there. They're right there.
Yep, I think that's a great perspective, Xenia. Great perspective. Jeff?
So Jeff, you want to give us your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So, where to begin? So this goes back to what I was mentioning earlier. When you have large, diverse populations going into the initial trial, in addition to testing for the kind of the primary outcome, and the way our studies are generally designed is they're powered for multiple health endpoints. So it's not just one health outcome that you got to get stat sig on to get that claim. Usually we generally have up to 4 health outcomes that you can have that statistical significance in. Because the sample size is large, the studies are powered to detect a small effect. So, outperforming placebo with a small effect size can yield that statistical significance. So it's kind of about greater chances of success on the front end. But on the back end, once we look at all the subpopulations, we can identify all the subpopulations that had statistical significance. Now, the study wasn't focused on those subpopulations, but in terms of if you wanted to do, say, a follow-on trial just targeting that subpopulation, you basically have your blinded placebo-controlled data in a unpowered subpopulation from your primary trial. So it allows follow-on trials as well to the extent you want to further develop products for that subpopulation or hone claims on that. So going from a product being clinically shown for sleep all the way to clinically shown for women's sleep or older women's sleep. And I think those are unique claims that can do well in the market. Now, one thing that we've been talking about in this call, I like that we, in addition to just talking about claims, we've been talking about the actual effectiveness being good for business too, right? The claim is acquisition, cool. But so many brands live or die based on churn and retention. And if the product actually works, if the consumer also has reassurances that it works because you're able to show the data, you're going to get that improved retention and customer lifetime value, which marketers love. And so in addition to us being able to provide them the data they might need for claims or follow-up trials, it's really that ability to say, here are the segments that disproportionately benefit from the product that you want to focus your marketing dollars on. So one example, this is the latest example, was Mega Foods is a client of ours, and they did a study with us on a new functional mushroom product that they released. And in addition to getting a claim on it, which to our knowledge, they became the first and only US brand with a functional mushroom containing product that has its own clinical, which is kind of shocking when you think about this multi-billion-dollar fast-growing functional mushroom space.
Right.
But in addition to, so that was their science team was happy. They got that claim. We're working on the paper now, the peer-reviewed publication. But in addition, we were able to give an entire subpopulation analysis to their marketing team, who's like, we get it. We get who is going to, on average, the product seems to work across the board for folks. And that's how they got that claim. But now they get to see what are the subpopulations that, not necessarily to make claims in those subpopulations, that we should focus our marketing efforts
on. Can target marketing on those groups, yeah.
That's exactly it.
So it enriches your go-to-market strategy, or if it's in the market, to enhance it, for sure.
Yeah, and I love how on this call we've been talking about expanding beyond just claims for the applications of trials. I think it's really exciting, and especially at a time now, we all talked about, some of you may have seen that McKinsey report that came out early this year saying for the first time ever, consumers are listing effectiveness and scientific credibility is the number one reason they're going to purchase a lot. It's no longer organic, natural, those aren't the main
it's
drivers
science.
as much. Right?
It's science. That's right. I did a survey for my other project that I'm working on. I'll talk about that later. But dietary supplement consumers use supplements every day. That's the number one thing they're looking for. They're looking for the science base. And then, of course, there's been other surveys, like you said, Jeff. But, one of the things that I always was challenged with way back when I started into this, and Tim, you can probably relate to this as well, is that, people, I even had some companies come back to me, and when I was negotiating the contract with them, they were like, it was a 12-week study, let's say it was a pilot study, and then they were saying they wanted to get data in 4 weeks. So I knew what they were thinking. They just wanted to get the data in 4 weeks, and then they weren't going to finish the study. Okay, so this is the kind of way companies were thinking and operating. I just want to it was to your point, they were just trying to think about a claim, right? Nobody was seeing the bigger picture of how it would enhance their brand as a whole and all these other, the power of that is incredible, but nobody was getting that at that time. And so I'm great to hear what you were saying, Jeff, about that, your experience in Zenyatta so far, because that's where we need to go as an industry, in my opinion, and build it from there.
So Tim, why don't you jump in and give us your thoughts on this?
Boy, since I've been in the industry for a couple decades, as you can imagine, we've worked with very small startups to Fortune 500s, right? And everyone in between. And initially, early on, it was a lot smaller. The companies were smaller generally. And so the word pilot study really resonates with me, because a lot of studies say they want to do a pilot because it's cheaper. But their intention, at least, what's communicated, is that we have, we're gonna run a full blown, RCT based on the data we get and so on. And that rarely happens.
No, rarely happens.
And so it's a tremendous waste of time and manpower, right, and resources to undertake pilot studies, like to tie up staff time and lab time to do a pilot study for a questionable sponsor when you really don't know what their intention is down the road. And so I've gotten better at recognizing some of those shysters early on now, although every now and then I still am surprised because
we won't name names here.
No, I can't. Obviously, I don't want to get in trouble on it, but I could name some names. But Yeah, I mean, one of the models that we proposed a few years ago was something we called it. It's like a contract, a research CRADA, creative research and development agreement with a company. We say, hey, listen, we agree that we're going to work on several projects together, 3, 4, 5, whatever, over the next X number of years. And these projects might entail a number of different product SKUs, maybe different active extracts, maybe different dosages, maybe different subject cohorts, and so on. And but let's ink this agreement so that we can help each other grow and be profitable, down the road. And I was surprised actually with early on, not so much anymore, but early on, and everyone on the call here can relate to this probably. You do a study and you provide a statistics report, and the biostats report is written in another language for most of the people on the sponsor end. They get this document. It's between 50 and 150 pages, and it makes complete sense to the statistician who wrote it. But to everybody else, like on the sponsor side, unless they have a scientific team, it is like Chinese math. What are the takeaways here? What are the 3 bullet points or the 6 bullet points or so on? And that's one of the things that we've gotten really good at over the last few decades is distilling down a very comprehensive biostatistical report to actionable and marketable pieces, chunks of information that brands can value. And so
that's a great approach, Tim. I mean, I wish I'd thought of that year ago when I was doing it, but
it's not easy. Again, as PhDs or physicians, we don't vet scientific claims, and we can write them, but we always preface an email or a report with these claims need to be vetted by your legal team, right? Mm-hmm. But these are based on our scientific expertise. This is what we're comfortable saying at this point. But again, even the claims sometimes don't resonate maybe with the end user, the target demographic. They need to see something else. Some fluff, something very creative, and so on, based on the science. And so that's a whole different ball game. And luckily, early on, thanks to Gene, I was able to write. I wrote for a bunch of different magazines, both in print and also online. And I really developed that ability to sort of talk to the common man and common woman to tell them, hey, what does this all mean? I always pretended I was talking to my mom and dad. Like, hey, how's the lab going? Great. What kind of projects do you have going on? I got a prostate health study going on. We got a bone density study in little old ladies and so on. Whoa, what'd you find? And when you can have that conversation with a sponsor, like you would have it with your brother or sister or father or mother, then I think you're nailing it. That's what companies really need.
No, consumer education was a big piece of this too. Even companies don't know how to communicate. I've worked with big companies that didn't even know how to communicate the benefits of a great innovation. And this is not that long ago. This is just a couple of years ago, launching something in the big company, remain nameless. The marketing team didn't know how to position it and to market it. And it was a revolutionary type product. So anyway, Mackenzie.
Yes, Mackenzie, your turn. Huh?
Yeah, I can resonate with everyone. To kind of piggyback off Tim, I think there's extreme power in a pilot study. I understand the struggle to loss on the people who don't understand what a pilot study is really intended for. But when you're getting these supplement and health companies coming in and they don't have efficacy established and they're kind of like, well, we think it does this, or we hear from our users that they're experiencing this, it becomes really valuable to collect that wearable data. If you want at-home labs or, blood draws, that's fine too. That's great. It's expensive, but a great option. And then pull in that participant reported data. Combine the subjective with the objective to kind of support. If you're really interested in HRV, let's look at depression, anxiety, and stress. Let's kind of pair these subjective outcomes with what we're hoping to see. And at the end of the day, if your hypothesis is not supported, you still learn something extremely valuable. And now it's time to take the next steps and determine where we take your product so that it can be successful.
Yep. And totally safety is, sorry, Jeff, safety is also one of the it's normally a secondary or tertiary outcome, but it's still very, very important, right? Both to regulatory agencies as well as consumers. So even if they don't get an efficacy claim, they should be looking forward to a safety claim. And so studies that provide both are ideal, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Jeff, you were going to say?
Yeah, I love that we are kind of triangulating on all of these different endpoints being valuable and useful, and for different types of claims and purposes as well. I think if you go back maybe a couple decades, pharma was all about the biomarker, the biomarker, the biomarker. And now you look where even pharma's gone, and it's quality of life and like all of these things that
Right.
like insurance
Exactly.
companies and medical societies care actually more about. So I think if you can have all of it, you can look at a digital biomarker from a wearable, which can give you certain types of physiologic data you'll never capture in blood and saliva. You could look at those biospecimens as well from blood and saliva, and you can look at the validated patient-reported outcome measures. That would be incredible, because also if you think about, let's give two maybe extreme examples. Let's say you had a product that moved the needle a bunch on a biomarker, but on the consumer wasn't really getting a noticeable benefit. That the longevity of that product, that repeat purchase, the stickiness of that product may actually be impacted. You might still be able to say, hey, it helps your stress because we saw your cortisol go down, but if the participants didn't really see any impact beyond the placebo group on their stress outcomes, that may be, you may have good acquisition with that claim. The retention may not be as good. Now, if you have similarly another product where maybe the cortisol data wasn't the most robust, but you saw on quality of life measures or mood or stress dramatic improvements relative to the placebo group, you may say, okay, it's a comparable claim, and maybe that stickiness, that repeat purchase is higher too. So all these levers can give you really different types of information, and ideally, get all of it.
It's
I think,
tough. Yes,
yeah.
it's difficult. Sorry, Bill. I've run into some issues in the past where a biomarker may not move. Everything you measure doesn't move, but maybe it's a validated questionnaire that does. Maybe it's libido. Like, hey, we don't know how it worked, but it worked. And then you go try to publish that study, and it's very difficult to do that because, and maybe it's changing, recently, but everybody wants to know why. Like, what, you just threw a bunch of stuff at the wall and this lit up and the other ones didn't. So now you say you have this great libido product. What's the mechanism of action? You don't have anything to indicate. Everything that you measured, didn't move the needle. So what do you have going there? And so that's a difficult conversation to have and to get past the goal line when you go to publish. So
Yeah, exactly.
in a perfect world what Jeff said is 100% correct. The biomarkers are moving in the same direction or a similar direction as the real world outcome. But it doesn't always happen like that. Yeah.
I
It
think
doesn't always happen like that, because you may not necessarily be collecting the right biomarker information. You may be trying to run a study where you think the mechanism of action is something that you understand, but actually what you're seeing in the reported outcomes is completely different and something you just don't know about. I think what actually you and Jeff both are alluding to is that our industry is, people may say that dietary supplements don't have enough science and don't have enough evidence. But the truth is, I actually think that science and evidence are much closer to the bottom line impact for this industry than they are for pharma, which was where I was cutting my teeth, right? Because quality of life, which they now do focus on more, there are many more studies that have an SF36 than don't, I think, when people are measuring a drug in a post-marketing or even a phase 3. But the patient of a drug recipient, like someone who is receiving the drug, is not necessarily the person paying directly out of pocket to receive that drug.
Exactly.
There is the insurance company in between, and that's really the pharma customer. So I think the revolution, if I can get back to the science, bring that back, the science revolution can come from this industry.
This
it can
is
come from saying,
exactly.
I love that.
It can come from saying about how people feel.
That's where I was going, guys. This is the revolution that
I'm not
our
going to steal
industry is
from
driving.
myself.
No, that's right. No, this is the revolution that our industry is actually going to drive that change, because the thinking in terms of getting into clinical research back when I was doing it years ago, and Tim can relate, it was all the traditional pharma thinking for clinical research. You need to get rid of that mindset altogether, because it's so much more complex. And then we need to translate that into education to not only the product and ingredient brands who want to do the studies, but also their consumers, so they know how to communicate it, because this is a different animal. Okay, yeah. It's totally different in terms of that, and that's what I'm excited about, and that's why I call it the science revolution, because for me it is a revolution. Tim, you were saying, is this a revolution? Like, yeah, it is, and we're going to take the stage, and it's going to be that the geek shall inherit the earth here.
Well, and when you talk about a revolution, folks, you think of one side versus another side. And in fact, if we consider the bad actors, there's some truth to that. And I, for one, would just like to spend a few minutes kind of addressing that.
That's right. Let's shift to the bad actors topic discussion. Then we'll talk about future trends, and then we'll wrap it up. I was looking at our time. So that's a good segue, Gene. So again, look, we're always going to have bad actors. They've been around as long as we've all been in the industry, forever how long that's been for all of us. It doesn't matter. It's been there before that. And even with today's digital age, I just love this example. So this is just this year. Ozempic is Ozempic, GLP-1. That's the talk of the town. That was a big trend and talk at the show too, in supply side. But it's really confusing because there was some social media influencer on TikTok in the UK that was touting oat Ozempic, and yeah. Actually, I give him credit for the cleverness of the name, but it was oats and lime juice and some other food ingredient, and this woman was getting all these. It's gone viral, and it's like so we have a real huge gap. It's something I don't think our industry does really well. And you want to know why we have the opportunities for the bad actors? Is because we're not doing a good job in the industry of really catering to the end consumer and educating them. So you can't attack. My point is you can't go after the bad actors directly or combat the social media influencers that are putting bad information out there. That's never going to go well. You got to find a different approach. And I think this is why we do it from the inside out in terms of this revolution of how we drive it to the point where the consumers at the end of the day, if they're educated, they're the ones that are going to drive and buy your product. And they're going to stop and say, wait a minute, product brand, I've been buying you for a while. You don't have any science to support that. I'm going to go to this brand. Right.
I'd like to know what our group, even not necessarily do the roundtable, but just open, anybody can jump in. What do you guys think? What do you guys think is the way to address the bad actors? Is it what Bill said? Is it something else? What do you think?
Go ahead, Mackenzie.
No, go ahead, please, Jeff.
No, I've been talking more. Please go ahead, Mackenzie.
I completely agree with Bill. I think that we do our due diligence and we, incorporate our best practices and we impact the people that we have direct contact with. We educate them and talk to them about what we know and open up that discussion and hopefully see a ripple effect from doing that.
That's why we're doing this podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that, or everybody just pretty much agrees?
I agree. Go ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Tim.
Sadly, I think we are a group. This is a selection bias, classic selection bias. We're a group that values science and values ethics and values morality. But the people that I don't know about lion's share of certain products, but if they see something shiny and it's a really cool name, they're going to buy it. So I think for a fair percentage of the consumer marketplace, they're not going to listen. They're not getting their information from us, sadly. I mean, I would love to know the viewership and the kind of people who will view this podcast, because I don't think it's going to get to, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think it's going to get to the Gen Zs and the other ones who are making snap decisions because they saw someone on TikTok say that berberine is nature's natural Ozempic. Right? So I have high hopes that we can help, and I think we should do our diligence to try. But I also think that, again, think about the product name. Product names can sell a product, right? Liquid IV. Brilliant. Yeah. Are there any studies on that specific product out there? I don't know. I've emailed that company several times and have yet to receive a response. Maybe there are. Maybe they're keeping them under their hat a little bit. I don't know. But people don't care. They buy it because it's a great name and because they have great outbound marketing. So I don't mean to be the wet blanket. But.
No, good points. I want to say that in general, I agree with Bill's proposition. I think that it's very hard to call out the bad players. I want to. There's many times I want to. And there's been once or twice that I have, but for all the good that it did. But I think that it comes down to is the education. Somehow our industry needs to do a better job at educating the consumer so they come to expect that kind of information. It'll be a process, and there's some things that we can do to help that, but I think that's what it sort of comes down to at the end of the day.
Jeff, tell us.
Jeff's been waiting patiently. You go. I'll talk to you.
Well, I think it's going to be a compilation of many things. Obviously, there's consumer movement and education that's going to happen. You could say your average consumer is probably much more aware and methodical in some ways than they were 10 years ago. I think there are possibly some stick approaches, whether it's FTC or class action lawsuits, but no one loves a stick approach. What if it's actually a carrot approach? And by that, I mean, yes, brands who have their own, maybe what you really need is a few hallmark brands who have their own science and really leverage and lean into that and kind of show how that the ROI on a trial or having data could be 100x. And you see some brands that launched, I believe it was, there's some energy beverage drinks that launched with like good clinical science and did super well and got scooped up by large CPG companies. So they've definitely leaned into that. Another thing that I think about is, as much as the regulatory agencies or class action attorneys may drive behavior, what about the retailers? They control the sales channel. And what we saw with Amazon doing the mandatory third-party testing, starting with a limited amount of categories, but you know they're going to expand that and requiring USP, NSF grade. That was pretty monumental. Is it that crazy to see, whether it's Amazon or other retailers, in addition to creating very strict standards for verification of the contents of the product, for them to start potentially issuing like a science badge? Like if you can produce and show that you had a gold standard trial up to snuff with FDA and FTC standards for competent, reliable scientific evidence, you can have a badge that your product is scientifically shown or proven or validated.
I love it.
As a carrot, that would be transformative. And all it takes is one retailer to be like, that's a brilliant idea, for suddenly all the other retailers to start, and as well as for the brands to start taking notice.
I think we started on that path. Sorry, I got to jump in here, Zena. So if you think about years ago when the third-party certification program started, we have analytical testing or whatever. So you had NSF, USP, whatever. There's three pillars to this. And our industry is just getting to the third, which is the science revolution. The first two are safety, and label claim. Does it have what it says on the label, and is it safe, right? But it doesn't address efficacy, right? It didn't, when those programs didn't do that. So I like what you're saying, Jeff. I actually had the same idea years ago, trying to think of how to implement that. How do we have sort of a science piece of this that's a badge? Maybe it takes an organization or group of folks like us to put that together or something like that. That's a good idea. But Xenia, you wanted to jump in on this too, I know.
I was going to say first that Jeff really teed up what you have cooking on the side for another podcast. So I'll just leave that tantalizing bit for everybody. Yes. But I want to say that
I'm actually, you guys are validating more for me when I'm launching again the Q1 next year. It's going to change the
discussion
industry.
Before, I was just going to validate. I definitely agree with Jeff's approach that there are going to be multiple stakeholders that are going to weigh in on this.
Yeah.
I think for us on the call as stakeholders, it's probably important to remember that we are all given actually a tremendous gift, which is that we're able to enroll people in clinical studies who might not necessarily be sick or looking for clinical trials as an option for care. It's an opportunity to have somebody participating in a trial have a joyous experience, right? Yeah, it's and my God, when I talk to participants, it's a lot of fun. I think there are lots of things we can do to counteract bad actors by doing things like individual study data return by default. So you can take your raw data, show it to someone else, give it to a provider. We do that for every one of our studies by default, and that came from my experience being a patient. We can educate them. I know that a couple of folks on this call do a lot of that, giving a study report, making a physician's report accessible after a study. Those are great ways in which we can involve participants in that journey. On the researcher side, this is going to be slightly controversial, but I think one of the main reasons we have bad actors is because it's very high stakes and it's very expensive to do research. So yes, of course, there are going to be like a select percentage of bad actors who are like, I don't care what the study results are going to say. I'm going to say that it makes you glow. And I think we can exclude them from that. But I think there are a lot of people who, because they don't have access to be able to do research or have been made to feel like research isn't for them. This could be a well-meaning entrepreneur working on a new supplement who really wants to do research and just doesn't know how to get started. Yeah. I think for those folks, when we increase access, when we make it affordable, when we say, you can actually, Tim, march up that, pilot study to RCT. If we can make that transition a little bit easier and a little more palatable for smaller businesses, maybe that's a way we can move away from bad actors as well.
That's the number one pushback.
Yeah. Hopefully a few people will watch this and get that idea and contact some of you folks and pursue this.
Well, I mean, look, that's always been the major pushback, is how much is this going to cost, right? But if you can show which I did, I put together numbers to show the ROI. That's why I wrote the article. Is like, okay, look, you're going to spend X. It's almost an exercise. You got to show them on a graph and say, hey, here's what you're spending. What's your marketing spend? Okay, take 1%. You said it, Tim. I always said the same thing. Maybe just take 1% of that, put it into science. This is what you can do with that. And that's going to enhance that. It plays off of that. This is a concept that's not in the mindset of our industry, but it's getting there. But you're right, Xenia. This is the barrier of entry has to come down so that it's accessible to the brands that really want to do that.
And let's continue to think about all of the value creation you can get. But and I love on this call, we already went way beyond claims. We talked about the actual effectiveness of a product, meaning it's stickier, people will buy more. Maybe you understand who's going to have better effects to market better. We talked about how retailers could be a forcing function by rewarding those who have science, but also it could be interesting to see how some supplement brands rise up, some wellness products rise up with good science and now start to tackle insurance reimbursement all the way to is it that crazy? If you had really good science, you could go to a massive employer like Facebook and be like, look, for $25 a month, all of your employees have access to my handful of validated SKUs. Here's all the data on it. And here's why I think you'll have better health outcomes. They'll be more productive and you'll save money because they won't be going to the doctor to get Ambien for their sleep issues that has side effects and paying for all those prescriptions. So unlocking those use cases, I think, fundamentally changes how people view that ROI. And the last thing I'll say is this is already happening. You talk to any of the, certainly the major CPG companies around the world that buy wellness products, that acquire other startups, as well as even the private equity groups. And over the last few years, they basically said, we're highly unlikely to buy an asset that doesn't have its own science, because we may be buying something that is just purely marketing and branding. And what we know about marketing and branding is eventually it gets people the fat ends and then the thing just crashes. Whereas if it has enduring science, that's something that we know when we buy that asset, it's going to continue to do well for years and years and years. And you see them publicly write commentary about how they won't, in the M&A world, they won't buy startups that don't have their own science or companies that have their own science.
And Jeff, I know that for a fact because I was part of the M&A group at Sanofi for 3.5 years. And we looked at a ton of targets. We were looking for acquisition targets in the U.S. in the supplement space. And I can't tell you how many I got. I did due diligence on as a subject matter expert, got into it. It's like, guys, let's pass on this one. It was all hype. And you're right. It's like this and then this. So, but they had some clever marketing, whatever, and they could actually be better if they actually invested in the science and really didn't try to obfuscate, what they were really doing. But when you start pulling back the curtain and diving into it, then it's like, okay, no, guys. And these are big brands, guys, that we looked at. I won't tell you who they were, that didn't get acquired. But we ended up doing the acquisition of Qnol because they had some cool technology. Yes, it was a little old patented technology, and pretty good sizable company in that space. And it was a $1.3 billion acquisition. So companies the big companies like the CPG companies, consumer, they don't really do innovation. Shock. They don't really do innovation. They acquire the companies that are doing that. So you're right, Jeff. You've keyed down exactly what is ongoing is private equity groups and also these big companies. That's what they're doing. They're looking for those companies doing that. So I guess a call out would be, hey guys, if you're kind of a medium-sized company or a new company, focus on the science and research because somebody's going to acquire you one day probably.
Which leads me to
the future.
Our topic to finish this off with, the future trends for science in dietary supplements. So I'd like to know, everybody's insights on sort of the evolution of supplements. What are future research areas? What are new technologies? What about the role of AI? What's going on here? What is everybody's thoughts on this? The future.
Okay.
Any one of you who want to go first?
I'm happy to jump in.
Go ahead.
We use a lot of Gen AI in the product, as I know you and in my mind, generative AI it's not going to replace people. It's not going to replace teams that are working
No,
on great stuff. It's going to extend talent.
it's a
So,
tool.
yeah. And I would say that what it can do and what it can do really brilliantly is it can lower the activation energy for innovation. And what I mean by that, one of
I
the
like that.
examples is when folks are writing protocols, it's a lengthy process, right? And one of the things that we included, because I had spent a lot of time digitizing protocols on behalf of the CROs that use us and the customers that use us. So we use Gen AI to say, great, upload your protocol. We'll digitize the entire study for you in a single set of time, like 3 or 4 minutes, depending on how complex that protocol is. Ideation for possible claims that you could make based on the ingredients and the publicly available literature. I think it's going to extend people who are researchers, so that the only thing that actually distinguishes you as a researcher is not how much tech you can afford, not where you are, not what school you went to, but how great a researcher you actually are, and how you think and how you design a study. And I think it's a truly equalizing thing. I think it's incredibly exciting.
I do too. I love the fact that you use the analogy of a chemical reaction. I can appreciate that as a chemist, lowering the activation energy. So you know how it is. It's like you're starting components. It's like this, and then
Yeah,
you guys
we all
have
saw
that
the graph. We all.
I
saw
also
it
be
in
doing
my
that,
head.
right? Just lower, my father's on the, I think my father's listening. Hi, Dad. But he's an organic chemist, so
There
he's
you
gonna
go.
love that.
Yeah, I appreciate
I
that.
can I can go next. We can keep the same order. Again, it's Radical Science as a public benefit corporation. Our mission has always been, how do we enable a future, accelerate the creation of a future where you have personalized, proven, personalized products. And as we have looked at this space more and more, we realize one of the ways to accelerate that is to start treating clinical research as the way you might treat high throughput drug screening, right? How do you get that there? First off, you got to get the barriers down. But what happens in
Right.
high throughput drug screening? You've got these wells, and I can put 100 candidates into those wells,
Right.
17 light up, and I start to recognize, oh, those 17 are promising for areas XYZ. Well, what if you could approach clinical research in that manner? I know this sounds a little crazy, but it's now possible when you have all these tools and technologies. And so what does it look like to, rather than laboriously and sequentially spend years trying to arrive at a proven and personalized wellness product, what does it look like to do a 50-arm, multi-arm trial, come up with 50 formulations, radically different ingredients or different doses of different ingredients, test them all head to head against one another and placebos, and you come out and you go, oh, great, 17 candidates all had stat sig. These were better in these types of people. These, in addition to treating the primary health outcome, had these other ancillary benefits. These had actually cheaper cost of goods. And this one actually was really
Right.
effective, but it had high side effects and nausea and stomach upset. So in one fell swoop, in a 9-month period, you can basically come to market with some of the most efficacious products known, in addition to the claims, the real efficacy, and now you know who to sell it to. And so that's really something that I think if we started to shift our mindset as to how we could parallel process this and treat clinical research the same way we treat high throughput drug screening, there can be a fundamental revolution in
I
this.
love that, man, because you know what we were doing in 1997, 98 for Centrum Herbals? We were doing bioassay panels, in vitro bioassay panels. So let's take St. John's Wort. It was CNS panel. So you had for mild depression, you had like 26 different assays. So it's analogous to what you're saying. It's taking that high throughput screening approach. That's what we did. And we used that to screen extracts of who was going to supply the St. John's Wort, because you have seasonal variations, geographic variations, all kinds of stuff. So you can get, I talk a lot about this in my article I did about botanical identity testing. So we did this with a bunch of different herbals to screen the suppliers. And then we found the ones that we had a bioactivity number that went on the supplement facts panel, by the way. Nobody's done that since. And we put a bioactivity profile, which I think I've been saying for a long time. Why doesn't somebody do that again, right? In terms of a product brand. And, you have a certain profile of whatever that was. And then that's how we screen the extracts that we were going to use. And then in the finished product, we had the bioassay testing again. And so we were actually doing way ahead. We were way ahead of our time, guys, in terms of doing that. And nobody's really done that since. But it was actually really, really cool. Maybe that's why it did in today's dollars 225 million first year retail. Now, can you name any other supplement brand today that has actually done that since? Nobody has. And of course, they did a big marketing spend, traditional TV advertising, that kind of stuff. But think about it today with today's technology, the tools that are available and the approaches from a very sophisticated science program. So, any of these product brands that don't have science teams, hey guys, I'm a consultant, hire me. I can tell you how to do it. Okay, little plug there, sorry. But for Net Prologis, contact me. I can tell you how to get there, guys. I can take your science team if you don't have one. Don't worry, we can bring the right people to do it. But anyway, I just wanted to build on what you said, Jeff, because I love that. That's my thinking in terms of it seems logical, right? But why isn't everybody doing that? Okay.
Right. Yeah. And imagine if like each one of your assay wells was actually an arm in a trial with 300 people to actually know the clinical effectiveness. Imagine the decisions you can make, the products you would have brought to market in 97 if you had access to that for comparable amounts of time and cost.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
So I'd like to also hear from Tim and McKinsey on their thoughts on future trends and all.
The
future trends. Well, boy. Well, AI. Yeah. Asked and answered very elegantly by Xenia and Jeff. I think it's going to help with identifying potential bioactive ingredients. I know there are a handful of companies that have already embraced AI in their product development and so on.
Brightseed, actually, their forger platform.
Neritas from Ireland.
Neritas, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, mechanisms of action, identifying bioactives that are unrecognized at this point, helping with research design, helping with endpoints. I think it's a pretty cool rabbit hole that we'll be able to go down. I think also using AI and data analytics for personalized medicine is going to be great. I mean, we've sequenced the human genome now for how long, but we still don't have a really solid, as far as I know, everybody had the idea, hey, we're going to test you and we're going to give you the multivitamin and mineral and omega-3 mixture that you need based on your DNA and so on. Yeah. And no one's been able to monetize that yet properly. Now we may be fast tracking to be able to do something like that, right? Like like Jeff said, high throughput and identifying which meds, if any, you really need to go on based on genetic predispositions for certain morbidity and mortality, right? Those are important. But in terms of trends in the industry, I mean, I think you're always going to have weight loss, right? You're always going to have, pre-workout. You're always going to have hair, skin, and nails, beauty from the inside. I think the huge trend that I've seen this past few years is with the microbiome, and I don't mean just gut health. I mean the gut-brain axis and the gut-muscle axis and every other axis that is out there. That's going to continue to grow, I think, in the industry. And we've embraced about half a dozen companies so far, sponsors that have worked with us to identify whether or not their prebiotic, postbiotic, symbiotic has sort of beneficial effects on the microbiota. So that's very interesting to me down the road.
Cool. It's you're right. That's where all the research is going. I was the global biotics lead at Sanofi for them, R&D, globally looking at all the different biotics that are out there, whether it's prebiotic, postbiotic, probiotics, symbiotics that are coming, and all the research is. You guys, if you haven't really looked in that area, there's a ton of research going on in that space, and so that's going to be. It's so much more sophisticated. The consumer even now is getting to a point where they don't. It's not just digestive health when they think about a biotic. In fact, even we're using the term biotic now instead of just saying probiotic and not saying the others, right? We're trying to capture the umbrella of that. So we're moving in the right direction for that. And now consumers understand for immune health, right? That this is really important, these types of ingredients. And then it goes to the gut-brain axis and all that. So anyway, McKenzie.
No, I love that. I personally think the future is longevity, which I think everyone kind of touched on in their own way, is where everything is going. And while our job is to generalize outcomes to establish efficacy, I am a full believer in personalized care. As Tim touched on, even outside of just genetics, we have our external environments where there's pollution and mold and all these factors externally, stressors that impact us, our internal or personal environment, what we're eating, what we're consuming on a daily basis. So I think my hope with AI and all this data that we now have access to is that we will be able to personalize care utilizing all of those factors from the different aspects of our life to really understand not just is this supplement safe for the general public, but is it safe for me based on me? I have autoimmune, I have migraines,
Right.
whatever each individual's case is, then being able to personalize it using AI and all the data we have access to.
I agree. I think, personalized nutrition, that terminology has been used, and it's been the subject of the Supply Side West education session, the last two supply sides. But the reality is nobody has cracked the nut on that yet.
No, they haven't.
It's not there yet until I launch my new venture next year. So, but I'm not even Gene, I'm going to share my thoughts about the future for where it's going, and you do the same, and we can wrap it up here. But so, there's actually, I've been in the industry a long time. Gene's been in it longer than I have. And it gets, over the years, it would get discouraging because you'd hit the wall sometimes with, whatever was happening in the industry. And you start to question, it's like, am I wasting my time in this industry? They're really going to get off their butts and really do about it. I've always been about the scientists, even before I came into the industry. So, I even got discouraged at one point and stepped out and went and taught chemistry at the university for a while, for about a couple of years. And I said, yeah, I'm done with it. These guys aren't getting it. This was after I closed down my CRO and said, you know what? Screw this. I'm not going to do this anymore because nobody really cares about that. So I'm pleased to say that I don't feel that way anymore, first of all. Okay. So, and I will tell you that, I'm in between here, and I'm not kidding. I am looking for consulting gigs, guys, and I can help a lot of companies in this area, in this space here, partnering with all of you in some way too, I think. So I think for me, it's, I've been studying AI technology, and a lot of people don't understand fully what that is. There's open AI, generative AI, and then there's, bots that you see that are AI. There's two different infrastructures in the back end in terms of large language models, natural learning, that sort of thing. It's actually pretty sophisticated, and it does take some time to develop. But you're going to see in the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see a revolution in multiple industries within our whole society as a whole, in terms of how that's going to change. It's a tool. For me, it's the realization. I remember when the first computers came out, guys, it's like I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. And it was supposed to make my life easier and more efficient. Well, it did to a point, and it's been at a plateau, I would say, for a really long time. Even though technology is advanced, you got a new cell phone, iPhone coming out every year with new features, but it has not gotten to the stage till now with where technology is coming in terms of AI that's going to go like that. And that's what's going to happen in our industry as well. So where do I see our industry in the future? I see it that there won't be any more bad actors because they won't be able to compete, because consumers are going to be sophisticated. They're going to be educated. They're going to know. They're going to have tools that are developed by tech entrepreneurs like myself and some of you guys, what you're doing in the technology side here, that are going to, they won't buy that anymore. So the brands eventually, it'll be an evolution where the brands that are not really done are just going to fall away. All the consumers are going to buy the products. Like you said, Jeff, you talked about maybe a couple of companies that are really leading the way. So who are our industry leaders that are doing it? There's a few of them we could probably name that are doing that. But once that happens, it's going to reach a tipping point where it's going to change almost virtually, it seemed like overnight, where that will transform our industry. Totally. We won't be talking about bad actors anymore, or mandatory product listing, or trying to have more regulations to do this and that. It won't be necessary.
Well, one thing I just want to add to what Bill said is a lot of this is about, I think often in the supplement industry, you have everyone skate to where the puck currently is, and you got to skate to where the puck is going. And, certainly understanding how AI may be impacting your business, not 6 months from now, but certainly yes, but also where is it going to be a year or two from now? Exactly. These exponential technologies are sneaky because it's growing exponentially, but early on you can't see it. 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 doesn't look great, but once you're hitting 1,024, 2048, 4,096, those doublings go crazy. Another thing I bring up is early on this podcast, we mentioned Ozempic, and everyone's skating to where the Ozempic puck is right now. But man, knowing about how many pharma companies are coming out with other GLP agonists that are going to be oral format, reimbursed by insurance, that may be a hard battle to win if you have a natural GLP agonist that isn't nearly as efficacious, isn't covered by insurance. Right now, it's an injectable, it's expensive out of pocket. Yes, you have a leg up, but very soon, take a look at what pipeline's coming out from the pharma companies. And for a consumer, insurance pays for it, highly efficacious, I'm sold. And that may not be a market for the wellness industry that's defensible once that new wave of GLP agonists come out. So it's just something to always think about what's coming down the line.
I'm gonna finish this up with my thoughts, which will be brief, regarding what you had to say, Bill, about the future, and there won't be the bad actors for the reasons you mentioned. I say from your mouth to God's ears, because that is what I definitely want to see. The trends that I do see happening as well are the AI generated raw materials concepts. I think are going to continue. I also see, good old fashioned ingenuity where, especially in the area of traditional herbal medicine cultures and people in our countries looking at some of those interesting ingredients or compounds within those ingredients and bringing those to market and then doing all the science to support that. So I see that as a continuing thing. And I do see the continuation. I see no end in sight of the continuation of people wanting to see real science, real support.
That's right.
I see that continuing to happen, and all of us playing a major role in helping to achieve that. So right. I, for one, would like to thank each of our guests, Tim, Jeff, Mackenzie, Zinnia, for joining us. I think this was a great podcast. Very, very great, good information for a lot of people. So thank you for being part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kudos
and
to you guys.
Also, Gene and Bill, for laying a lot of the groundwork for the work that we do over the last many
OGs.
Actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to be really ignorant here. What does OG stand for? It's used all the time.
I think it's original gangster, but it's you're right. No one, you never think about that. It's
old guard.
Can we go with
old guard? That's better. Okay.
Old guard.
I was thinking the original guys or something, or I don't know. I didn't
That's
know.
That's better too. Original guys and gals.
Yeah, and gals. It works both ways. There you go.
Original God. How's that? Bring them all together. Thank you so much.
Listen, thank you guys for joining. Don't go anywhere. We're going to close it out here. We're going to make sure everybody's feeds get uploaded. Yeah.
Don't exit until we tell you, because otherwise all your stuff will disappear.
But again, anyway, I was checking. We were live streaming successfully to LinkedIn, so I think we had a lot of people following us today. I wasn't able to check. I'll check that later. But again, thank you so much for all of you for joining on this show. I think I make a prediction that this is going to be one of our most viewed shows. And then we're going to promote it heavily. And then once we finish this, we'll send it to you guys. You can send it to your networks, and we can really build on that. And we can do the science revolution. So there we go. All right.
Thanks, guys.
And I'll take us out here. It's